The government of New Zealand held a royal commission of inquiry. For some of us, this actually sounds familiar because Australia did something like this in 2016. And of course, as you would expect with the Jehovah's Witnesses, it was explosive. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to my channel. My name is Monica. For those who are new, thank you so much for stopping by. Here, I create ExJw and beauty content. If it resonates with you, please do subscribe. But most importantly, give this video a thumbs up. Let the algorithm know you enjoy this type of content and you want the world to know the truth about the Jehovah's Witnesses. And of course, let us know where you are watching this video from. Guys, honestly, this makes me so emotional. Like last week when I was looking at the video I uploaded and just seeing people from Thailand, Malaysia, Vienna, South Africa, Iceland, Ghana, Alaska, Notting Hill, Sweden, Poland. This is honestly amazing. So many of us have actually woken up. The Jehovah's Witnesses are in trouble. They are in trouble. Let's get into the video. I made a lot of notes because this is so long, but if you want to read the whole report, I will definitely have it linked down in my description box. So what was the purpose of the inquiry? I think we should start right there. Firstly, they wanted to learn about the care provided by the Jehovah's Witnesses to their members. They wanted to learn about the alleged abuse in the care of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the factors that actually increased the risk of abuse, the steps that the faith took to prevent and respond to this risk, and then lastly, the barriers to disclose that could have possibly helped victims to speak up. Let's look at the definition of care for this report. For the avoidance of doubt, a faith-based institution may assume responsibility for the care of an individual through an informal or pastoral care relationship. An informal or pastoral care relationship includes a trust-based relationship between an individual and a person with power or authority conferred by the faith-based institution, where such a relationship is related to the institution's work or is enabled by the institution's conferral of authority or power on the person. I have to note here that in a litigation in 2023 and 2024, the Jehovah's Witnesses actually challenged the inquiry's interpretation of the phrase where a faith-based institution assumed responsibility for the care of an individual, as well as the amendments to the terms of reference. The High Court and the Court of Appeal dismissed those challenges, and at the time of writing, the Jehovah's Witnesses had sought to leave to appeal to the Supreme Court. The Jehovah's Witnesses also filed a judicial review application in late June 2024 and sought access to this case study before it was presented to the Governor General. The High Court dismissed the application for access to the case study in advance of his presentation to the Governor General. Now, why the Jehovah's Witnesses actually did all of this is because they didn't want people to find out about the victims that were actually going to speak up during this whole inquiry. They went out of their way to try and silence these voices. And in my next upload, I'm actually going to go through all of those stories. So if you're interested, check out for my next video. So now that we have a clear understanding of what care actually means in this report, let's now look at when this care actually takes place within the Jehovah's Witness community. So the inquiry focused on situations where the Jehovah's Witnesses assumed responsibility for the care of individuals in the context of witnessing, pastoral care, judicial committees, working bees, and other faith-based activities that took place outside of the home. Now, I quickly just want to go over all of these care activities because they are so well researched, so well explained. Guys, the Jehovah's Witnesses have honestly been exposed. Listen to this. So when it comes to witnessing, that's when the Jehovah's Witnesses try to convert people and have them glorify God, and they are basically instructed to make disciples out of people. This often referred to as door knocking, witnessing, field service, or preaching. Listen to this. The faith explained that a Jehovah's Witness considers it a personal choice to deliver the Bible's positive message to all people, while respecting every person's right to believe what they choose. Guys, is this the truth? Is this the truth? Was field service just something that, hey, you can do if you want, if you don't want to, it's okay? If that was the case, why did we have to report our hours? Why were certain people given a target of hours to reach? I mean, this is just optional, right? Okay. So the faith has said it was a common practice for children to accompany their own parents when going to witness. The evidence before the inquiry, however, shows that at times when witnessing, children and young people also accompanied elders who were not from their family. For those that do not know, a lot of us were separated from our parents or our families when we were doing field service. I even remember with myself, like I didn't really do field service with my mom or my dad. It was most of the time someone else in our congregation, a young child, a girl, and I would be going to field service with way older men. These men could do literally anything, because when you go to field service, you are entering different houses, different homes, and anything can happen. Literally anything can happen because you are out of sight from most people. So during the inquiry period, Jehovah's Witnesses elders also provided pastoral care or pastoral support to congregants. And as part of the pastoral support role, this is where elders visited homes for matters such as Bible students, pastoral oversight before a baptism, and pastoral support or care outside of the Kingdom Hall environment in their capacity as an elder. There are credible evidence that children and young people receiving pastoral care were at times alone in the care of elders during pastoral care situations of this nature. A former elder, Shane McCann, described studying with children without their parents being present at the request of the parents who believed that they were actually doing the best thing. He also described pastoral care including visiting members of the congregation in their homes to assist them or go over encouraging articles from Watchtower. Where families were considered fatherless, elders were primarily responsible for making sure that women and children were taken care of. Now let's go to working bees and other organized activities. So children and young people in the faith were also placed with elders, ministerial servants, or other adults in group activities described by a former elder. And this was called working bees. For example, they were cleaning and maintaining the Kingdom Hall. They were organizing sports or outings for the fatherless children. Shane McCann, the former elder, went on to give another testimonial where he explained that there was a widow with children in his congregation, and as an elder, he would take the children on outings for a meal to be a role model for them, and this would be unsupervised by their mother. He referred to the Jehovah's Witness magazine Awake of February 8, 2000 as saying, Christian men can often rescue the fatherless boy by taking a sincere and healthy interest in him. What I love about this and everything that's taking place is that the Jehovah's Witnesses can deny as much as they want. They can try to lie as much as they want, but their content, their publications, their books, they will reveal them. So let's now look at investigations and judicial committees. All baptized members are considered accountable to the faith and can face formal judicial action for any wrongdoing. Yet, the age to get baptized as a Jehovah's Witness can sometimes be as young as 10 years old. So the Jehovah's Witnesses require that every allegation of sexual abuse must be initially investigated by 2 elders to establish the facts. Investigating elders may take further action only if the truth of an allegation can be established according to the scriptural standards of proof. For those standards to be met, the elders must usually receive either a confession by the accused or the testimony of 2 or 3 credible eyewitnesses. A judicial committee is formed after it has been established that a serious sin has occurred. So you going to the elders telling them, hey, I've been abused, I've been harmed, doesn't mean it's going to be investigated. They need credible eyewitnesses before a judicial committee is established. During these initial investigations and subsequent judicial committees, the elders were sometimes alone with children or young people, questioning them as part of the investigation or committee. Parents are often not present during these investigations or committee processes. Imagine your child who's been harmed, who's a minor, having to explain to a group of men what actually happened to them. That time, you as a parent, you're not even present. Some of these men are the very men who are harming children. Imagine. That's what's happening within the Jehovah's Witness community. Now let's look at the factors that actually increase the risk of abuse within the care of Jehovah's Witnesses. Firstly, it's the status of leaders and the power imbalance between them and the members of the congregation, the organization, the community, whatever you want to call it. Secondly, it's women not being able to actually hold positions of power or of influence, and also being separated from the rest of the world or the secular world. And then lastly, it's the inadequate vetting and training of these elders. Let's quickly now unpack this. Let's start off quickly with the power imbalance point. In the 1980s, Watchtower actually gave guidance. Be obedient to those taking the lead. And this basically was giving direction to members that they should be obedient and submissive to the men taking the lead. The guidance also suggested that if a member had any doubts about the abilities of those leaders, they should actually self-reflect and actually think to themselves, am I maybe overemphasizing the leader's imperfection? So you can't even say anything about these people who are placed in power, because if you are, why are you questioning them? Why are you thinking these people who were placed by God would do anything wrong? You should look at yourself. Maybe you are the problem. Someone actually gave a testimonial during this inquiry, and they said that limits were placed on who we could associate with, what we wore, what we watched, and what we read, and how much education we received in our recreational activities. The Jehovah's Witness Church was not just a place of worship. It reached into the core of almost every aspect of our lives. Now let's look at the positions of females within the religion and how not having any females in power actually causes even more abuse to take place. There are no women elders or ministerial servants in the Jehovah's Witness religion or community. One article commenting on the Australian Child SA Abuse, the Royal Commission case study on the Catholic Church highlighted how the roles and the absolute authority of male clergy within the Catholic Church contributed to the abuse occurring and the failure to respond to it. And an obvious analogy exists within the Jehovah's Witness community as well. With only men as elders, it was less likely that women could feel able to disclose to an elder what has actually happened to them. Patriarchal leadership structures result in what has been described in relation to the Catholic Church as unchecked, divinely sanctioned patriarchal power. One academic has even found that patriarchal hierarchies within the faith-based institutions contribute to a culture where disclosing abuse is discouraged and victims are unsupported. Here's what a former female Jehovah's Witness actually told the inquiry. The effect of being brought up as a Jehovah's Witness was that as a young adult and older, I believed I was secondary to men and boys, and that I had to do what they said, especially older men, especially white men. I believed I was not good for anything, and I was not a good Jehovah's Witness. Here's what another former member actually described about all of the positions of authority being held by men. The leadership structures in the Jehovah's Witness Church do not lend itself to the identification or elimination of abuse. In particular, the church does not encourage or reward education, so most of those in positions of authority have only a basic school education and no particular skills in detecting or discouraging abuse. Furthermore, all of these positions of authority are all held by men. Many female survivors of SA will feel too uncomfortable to disclose the fact of their abuse to a man, and therefore this leadership structure operates as a further form of suppression. I keep emphasizing this, the need to go to school after leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, because so many people in this community are so uneducated, and this is not for elitism or just thinking you're better than other people because you're more educated. No, education really opens your mind. You're able to understand the impact of having just men hold positions of power and what it does to people psychologically. It's so important to be educated, because you see, when people are not educated and they hold positions of power, look at what they do. They abuse it. Another form of something that holds people back from speaking up is the fear of being shunned and being so separated from the rest of the world. The fear of being shunned was a significant factor for witnessing during the inquiry period. Jasmine Grew said that when you are a Jehovah's Witness, you only know the ways of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They are your friends, your family, and a lot of people within the religion work for each other. To break away and start a new life outside of the religion after being under its control, it's extremely difficult. This fear prevents people from leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. The fear of shunning would inevitably have been felt strongly by Maori because of the importance of connections to Wahanu, Hapu, Iwi, and similarly for Pacific peoples and other minorities with strong ties to family and their broader communities. The Jehovah's Witnesses and their distrust of government authorities meant that issues were commonly dealt with internally. Naomi Burnett told the inquiry that members are discouraged from reporting matters to the police, and elders within the faith hold their own processes for dealing with issues that arise. She also explained how the faith views things differently from the secular world. For example, they consider child abuse within the faith as a sin rather than a crime. And they have a two-witness rule when it comes to establishing guilt. And then Elise echoed this point, noting that crimes like child abuse are not reported to the police. Instead, those affected must report such matters to the church elders. Ms. Naeem also explained how Jehovah's Witnesses members could not look into issues on their own accord. Guys, this inquiry really unpacked everything, and I'm here for it. So now let's quickly talk about the vetting and recruitment and training process of these elders who are given so much power. There is no evidence of any secular vetting before Jehovah's Witnesses leaders or elders were appointed during the inquiry period. Instead, elders were appointed based on scriptural qualifications inspired of the Holy Spirit. Literally. There was also no secular training on child safety, safeguarding, or abuse prevention within the faith. The faith told the inquiry that elders received training in children's safety, right? Listen to this nonsense. They received training basically to help them on their roles of being spiritual shepherds. This is a one-day course known as the Kingdom Ministry School for Elders, which the faith says includes reminders of current policies on a range of issues, including child safeguarding. This school has been operating since 1959. So later in the inquiry period, they actually looked at a section of the school which was specifically dedicated to discussing a 1997 Watchtower article on Child SA entitled, "Let Us Abhor What Is Wicked." Similarly, the faith says that all circuit overseers also attend a school that year discussing the same article. During 1998 to 1999, the circuit overseers also met with all elders in their respective congregations to review child protection policies, including the need for children not to be asked to confront their abusers in order to form a judicial committee. Yet, a former elder, Shane McNeil, who was an elder for 3 years, said that in his experience in Australia, I did not have any expertise in helping victims or investigating reports of abuse. Elders have no formal training outside of the organization, and I feel they are not adequately qualified to investigate such matters. He went on to say he received minimal formal training on how to investigate allegations or interview victims. No wonder they ask such inappropriate questions, because if you have attended a judicial committee, you know how inappropriate it can be. Very inappropriate. I can assure you, elders are ill-prepared to handle such complex issues. I am horrified that I was part of a process that can cause more harm than good. Now let's look at the steps that the Jehovah's Witnesses apparently took to prevent and respond to the risk of abuse. Inadequate disclosure processes can actually prevent abuse being disclosed and allow for it to actually continue. It increases the risk of non-disclosure if children and young people are disempowered or do not feel able or safe to disclose their harm. This prevents meaningful intervention and protection measures and can contribute to a situation of impunity for abusers, which is the case for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now let's look at some of these processes of handling and responding to concerns and their effectiveness. While during the inquiry period, I don't know how many times I can say inquiry, found out that the disclosure of Child SA or any other kind of wrongdoing within the Jehovah's Witnesses community were actually required to be made to elders. And then once allegations of child SA were made to elders, the organization would open a spiritual investigation. Oh my God. Spiritual investigation. What are you? Spiritual police officers? Spiritual investigators? Come on. Investigating elders would take further action, including establishing a judicial committee if the truth of an allegation was established according to the scriptural standards of proof. Here's someone's experience talking about how they were made to attend one of these judicial committees as a minor. I was petrified having to talk in front of male elders about what my uncle had done to me as a child, and being on my own and fearing that I was going to be in trouble. All these men were present and there was no one supporting me. I was made to feel like I had done something wrong. There were 7 chairs in a circle, 2 elders, my father and I on one side, and 2 elders from my uncle's congregation and him on the other side. In this judicial process, the allegations were put to my uncle and he admitted to the offending. So a second witness was not required. I was made to share and describe in detail the abuse in front of these men, including my abuser. I had no support. My mother was not allowed in, and I was absolutely petrified throughout the meeting. Furthermore, another thing that holds back people from sharing what has happened to them or exposing their abuses and talking about their abuse is the stupid 2-witness rule. During the inquiry period, the Jehovah's Witnesses had a rule that before a judicial committee could be formed, there must be sufficient evidence to establish the wrongdoing, and that sufficient evidence meant a confession or 2 or more eyewitnesses to either the same incident of wrongdoing or a separate incident of the same kind of wrongdoing. They also talked about the lack of reporting to external authorities. Former Jehovah's Witnesses said that during the inquiry period, complaints and concerns of abuse were not often reported to secular authorities. Parents and survivors typically reported abuse directly to the elders rather than actually going to a secular authority like the police. Elders handled these reports internally without any training and did not involve police. And then another thing is inadequate consequences for abusers. I don't even feel like unpacking this one because of how could the Jehovah's Witnesses even possibly provide adequate consequences? They are not the law. They are not the police. They are not the court. How can they even provide this? But the outcomes of a judicial committee were just disfellowshipping. The elders would formally announce to the congregation that a wrongdoer was no longer one of the Jehovah's Witnesses, but would not even tell the congregation the reason. The inquiry heard that sexual offending was often not made known to other congregation members, but instead kept quiet. One witness said that the Jehovah's Witness culture was to hush cases like that up and keep it in-house so as not to tarnish the JW squeaky clean image. Then there was also record-keeping practices that the inquiry actually looked into. Creating and retaining accurate records of abuse allegations is fundamental to preventing and responding to abuse in care, as well as redress processes. Incomplete, inaccessible, or inaccurate records can make it difficult for an organization to know whether someone has previously committed or been accused of SA, and is a safeguarding risk. Without sufficient and accurate information about past behavior, an organization cannot ensure it responds appropriately to risk. In addition, for many survivors of abuse in care, the first step in seeking closure is to request records from the institution. If it is difficult to do so, this can be traumatic for the survivor, of course. This report goes into so much detail. I would really encourage you to go through it. It really exposes the Jehovah's Witnesses for who they are. Like, there is no lies, no embellishments. Everything is stated as it is. I'm just going to read a summary of their findings, and yeah, we already knew this, that there is credible evidence that SA occurred in the care of the Jehovah's Witness faith. The practice of elders questioning children or young people who were victims of SA during investigations and judicial committees processes was inappropriate and emotionally and psychologically abusive. The government of Japan also basically supported the statement, because literally a few months ago they also stated that the processes of the Jehovah's Witnesses of investigating SA in itself is a form of SA again for the victim. There were also factors that increased the risk of abuse in care for the Jehovah's Witnesses, which included the status of the leaders and the power imbalance between them and the members of the faith in context of elevated levels of influence within the faith. The barriers to disclose of abuse, including the place of females in the faith, the fear of exclusion and relative disconnection from the secular world, and the lack of vetting and training of elders in child protection and abuse prevention. The full extent of abuse in the care of the faith cannot be quantified for reasons including inadequate record keeping and the barriers that we just went over. Steps taken by the faith to prevent and respond to abuse in care were inadequate. In particular, there was inadequate vetting and training of elders in child protection and abuse prevention. The policies, rules, and standards relevant to Child SA were from various separate directives from the governing body across many different issues of different publications, all based primarily on passages from scriptures. Processes for raising, handling, and responding to the concerns or complaints of abuse in care were also inadequate. Honestly, I'm not really shocked by anything that I've read in this report. These are things we've been talking about on this channel. And it just feels very validating to see governments now take this very seriously, for them to actually investigate and even give words to certain things we knew of or we saw but we just couldn't explain. I feel like it was done so well. I would really urge all of you to read this report and go through it. If it's too long for you, at least just go through the executive summary, because there's so much to learn here. And I will close it off by just saying that the Jehovah's Witnesses, you are in trouble. You are in trouble. Governments are waking up to your shenanigans. And you know what? Witnessing all of this is going to be sweet. It's going to be good, because your downfall is quite imminent. If you do not reform, if you do not change, I think we're going to see a lot of elders being arrested and charged for the things that they have actually done in the name of being Jehovah's Witnesses.